Hi, I'm Kyle Kuyat, certified financial planner, and I've helped hundreds of people retire earlier than they thought possible. But oftentimes, the retirees who realize this often find out too late. So that's exactly why I'm making today's video, because the most expensive year of your retirement might be the one that you spend still working when you no longer have to. We'll cover how to decide whether or not working to 65 is worth it or not, whether you should even retire earlier, and the reasons you might want to consider doing so. And at the end, I'm going to give you 4 simple questions to help you determine if you're actually ready to retire early. Let's get into it. Now, before I make the case for retiring early, let's talk about why you may want to work longer. Because for some people, working past 65 can absolutely still be the right call. There's a study out of Stanford called The Power of Working Longer, and what it found is eye-opening. By delaying your retirement by just 3 to 6 months, that will improve your retirement standard of living as much as saving an extra 1% of your salary would have done for the last 30 years. That means that just 3 to 6 months of working longer versus 30 years of saving an extra 1% have the same exact effect. Also, some people genuinely love their work, including the structure, relationships, and the purpose that comes with it. But I often find that one of the main reasons why people wait until 65 is health insurance. Health coverage on your own dime, of course, can be expensive before Medicare kicks in, which makes that employer plan worth real money. Now, obviously, if the assets simply just aren't there yet, having more earning years is a necessity more than it is a choice. But going back to our study, it assumed that when you retire, that you claim Social Security on the same day. And of course, that assumption has a larger impact on the plan than most people realize. And here's why. Social Security pays you delayed retirement credits of roughly 8% for every year you wait past your full retirement age, all the way till age 70. So, if your full retirement age is 67, waiting till 67 means a check roughly 24% larger for the rest of your life, with inflation and adjustments on top of that. And as you know, nowhere in the rules of claiming Social Security does it say that you have to be working while you wait. Now, if you're married, this decision carries even more weight because when one spouse passes, the surviving spouse gets to keep the larger of the 2 checks. So that larger age 70 benefit is what your spouse lives on for the rest of their life if you go first. And if for married couples, locking in that larger survivor check is one of the most protective moves that you can do in retirement planning. But I want to put real numbers behind this. Picture a couple, they're both 62 with roughly $2.5 million saved between their 401ks and their brokerage account, and they're spending around $110,000 a year. Instead of the higher earner working till 67, they instead retire now and live off their investments to bridge that gap until they decide to take Social Security at age 70. If they do so, they'll end up with the same checks the Work Till 67 plan was chasing, plus 5 years of their early 60s that they'll never have to buy back. That's why I love the bridge strategy, and that bridge works at almost any age because especially if you have a taxable brokerage account, that has no age restrictions. So we can work before 59 and a half without any penalty if you stop working even earlier. And in addition to that, if your 401k allows for it, the Rule of 55 will let you tap into your employer 401k plan without any penalty once you separate the year you turn 55 or later. Now, let's keep that brokerage account in mind because there's more tax benefits there that we'll get into in a minute, which makes this even better. But let's stay on this example because I want to run the numbers on this strategy. Going back to our couple, they spent $110,000 on $2.5 million, that's going to give them roughly a 4.4% withdrawal rate, and the portfolio is only carrying that load during those bridge years before they claim Social Security. Now, when their Social Security checks turn on at 70, call it roughly $75,000 a year between the 2 of them in today's dollars, well, that portfolio has to produce about $35,000, and that's only a 1.4% withdrawal rate from their portfolio for the rest of their lives. Now, quite frankly, I'd argue this couple can be even more aggressive than that. They could spend more than the $110,000 a year. They could retire even earlier than 62. And there's a claiming strategy that makes that whole bridge even easier. They could have had the lower earner claim their Social Security check first, while the higher earner still delays until 70. And here's why that might make sense, because the moment the lower spouse's check turns on, it actually starts covering a chunk of that $110,000 spending number, or whatever it might be for them, which is going to shrink the amount that has to come out of their portfolio during the most vulnerable years of the plan. And like we said earlier, the surviving spouse is going to keep the larger of the 2 checks. That means that the smaller benefit will disappear when their first spouse passes away, no matter when it was claimed. So delaying it buys you very little in the first place. That's why claiming the smaller benefit early is kind of a no-brainer. Now, if you run it that way, the numbers get even better. With one check flowing in from day one, The bridge year withdrawal rate drops well below that 4.4% we talked about earlier, and that's going to give them even more room to spend or retire earlier, or hey, maybe even both. But you may be wondering what happens if you retire at 62 straight into a bad market. That's what's called sequence of returns risk, and it's the right question to be thinking about. It's also exactly what that bridge account is built for. So that's why keeping 2 or 3 years of spending outside of the stock market means you can wait out a rough first stretch while the bridge is going to be paying your bills instead of having to sell stocks at the bottom to cover your spending. So for a couple with $2.5 million, it could look something like this. Bucket 1 is in cash in short-term reserves, roughly 2 years of spending. Let's call it $220,000, say in high-yield savings, money markets, short-term CDs, things like that. Now, this is the money that's going to be paying the bills no matter what the market is doing. Bucket 2, if you want one, is roughly the next 5 years of spending, and that'd be around $550,000. That's in bonds and conservative investments. I like shorter duration right now if you did want a medium bucket. Now, your bucket number 3, that's going to be for growth. So in that same example, that's the remaining $1.7 million. That money's going to stay in stocks because it has a decade plus time horizon. So let stocks do their job. You're not having to pull from it. And if you prefer to only have 2 buckets, I would put more in bucket 1 to smooth out that ride. Because whether you have 2 or 3 buckets, when you structure it this way, roughly 25 to 30% of your portfolio is defending your early retirement sequence of returns risk, while the other 70% is going to be compounding for you for decades of spending to come. Now, there's more options than completely calling it quits. And we have clients that leave their career at 60 and they just keep the part of their work that they enjoy. I often say that, look, maybe the 80% of it you really, really love, but boy, that 20% is what's making me want to retire sooner rather than later. So the good news is you have options. That could be consulting. That could even be a paid hobby or something that you always wanted to do, because even $20,000 or $30,000 a year can make that bridge in those bridge years even easier to build. Now, if you're watching this and you're thinking, hey, look, I love a second set of eyes on these exact numbers for my plan. Well, that's exactly what we help people do. There's a link down below if you want to set up a time to chat, and I'd be happy to help. Now, even when the math works at 62, most people keep going anyway. And in my experience, the reason is we price this decision in one currency. It's dollars. A lot of times we're focused on hitting a certain number, they can come to me and say, Kyle, what number do I need to be able to retire? And that's a prudent question, but there's more to it than that. Because whether you realize this or not, money happens to be the only currency that's still on the board that you can still get more of. Newsflash, your health and your time are both going to be spending down whether you're working at your desk or whether you're enjoying that time in health and retirement. So it's important to price this decision properly. I created a little framework for this, and I think it's helpful because your retirement quality isn't just about your money. It's your money times your time times your health. So say that you're 50 with $1.5 million saved. You figure you got 30 active years ahead of you, and you're feeling pretty healthy. Let's call it 95%. I don't know, that sounds good. So if you multiply those together, you get about 42.75 million of what I call life units. So now let's say in that same example, you waited till 65. You've doubled your money. Now you got $3 million. Nicely done. But at the same time, now you've only got 20 good years left and your body isn't what it was. Let's call it 60%. If you run that same math, you get 36 million life units. So on paper, you've doubled your money, but you've actually lost 16% of your retirement. See, retirement planning obsesses over the number while ignoring time and health until they're already shrinking. That's why I beat the drum on it so many times in these videos, and many of you reach out to me say that's the reason why I want to have a conversation, because I'm thinking about this. So let's put some numbers behind it, because there's a window where all 3 of these sort of peak together, and so many people are focused on hitting their number that they sort of just missed this entirely. As it stands today, Americans live to roughly 79 on average, but recent data puts our healthy life expectancy about 12 years short of that, meaning that the last 12 years of your life are going to be limited by your health in some way, shape, or form. That's why the stages of your retirement can be broken out into your go-go, slow-go, and your no-go years. And the spending data for retirees backs this up. In fact, Morningstar found real retiree spending declines roughly 1% to 2% a year as people age. So that's what creates what's called the retirement spending smile, which simply means that the expensive years are going to be your early ones. They're often filled with travel experiences that you've been maybe deferring for a while you're working. You want to live it up and you want to enjoy the money that you've saved. But they're also the same years that a work to 70 or longer plan is going to spend in meetings or at their desk when they no longer have to. Then there's the money that you'll never spend. Now, research finds that roughly 1 in 3 retirees who reach their mid 80s with 100% or more of their original savings still intact. So if you retired with $1 million in your mid 80s, 1/3 of the time, you're still going to have at least $1 million. Now, some of you are thinking that money isn't unspent. That's my long-term care cushion, or that's a legacy that I'm leaving behind to the kids. And quite frankly, look, I'm okay with both of those things because long-term care belongs in your plan even if you never use it. In fact, we bake it into most plans regardless. And if you have a legacy goal, well, that's going to change the picture here entirely. But if your plan is to die with zero and the goal is to spend it while you can still enjoy it, well, then that's a fundamentally different question. Because even if you plan to leave money behind, most of you want to enjoy the money you've worked so hard for while you still can. And then there's purpose. Now, researchers at Rush University followed 1,000 older adults and found the ones with a strong sense of purpose had roughly 40% lower mortality rates. And Harvard's 85-year study on adult development, and this is an awesome study, by the way, if you have not checked this out, it found that the quality of your relationships predicts late life health and happiness more than your portfolio ever even will. Now, it's probably no question that past a certain asset level, and candidly, most of you watching are past this, more money on your statement is going to stop moving the needle at some point. Because for most families that reach out to us, the real risk is running out of your health and your time, while the money that you worked so hard for and the discipline that got you here in the first place, well, that's now the very thing preventing you from enjoying it. And I'm not here to beat you up. I get why. Because without clarity on the financial side, a lot of retirement dates just keep getting delayed. And one of the largest unknowns here are taxes. If you remember a couple living off their brokerage account when they retired earlier, well, during their bridge years, their taxable income was intentionally lower. And that low income is an asset all by itself because when you do it right, it opens up two of the most powerful tax moves in retirement. The first being Roth conversions. Now, before RMDs kick in at age 73 or 75, depending on when you were born, well, that can move your pre-tax money into Roth and fill up those lower brackets at rates that we may never see again and you may never see again, depending on when you retire. Because the longer you work, well, the more that window is going to shrink. And that window matters because of what researchers call the tax torpedo. Now, when all these things come together with Social Security and taking those distributions, well, that could push you retiring the 22% bracket to an effective rate of north of 40% on their next dollar on their IRA if they don't do anything about it. So if you don't, well, you're going to feel the effects either way when RMDs kick in. But if you strategically convert and pay taxes while your income is lower and manageable, well, you'll reduce its impact on your plan later on. Now, the second of these is tax gain harvesting. In 2026, a married filing jointly couple can realize long-term capital gains at 0% federally as long as their income stays under $98,900. So when you stack the $32,200 standard deduction on top, that's over $130,000 of gross income taxed at 0%. So if you strategically sell your winners, you can pay nothing in taxes. And when you buy them back, you've reset your cost basis. Now, our couple here could be doing the exact same thing in the years that they're living off of that brokerage account, like I mentioned earlier. Now, your conversion dollars and harvested gains, those are going to share the same bracket space. So it's important to be aware of how much room you have on both sides of these. And then there's Medicare, everybody's favorite. Everybody loves Medicare, right? It has a 2-year look back, which means your premiums at 65 are going to be set by your income at 63. So those final salary years can come back as IRMAA surcharges on your Medicare premiums for the first couple years of your retirement. Now, there's some good news here because retiring counts as what's called a life-changing event. So when your income drops, you can actually appeal those surcharges with a one-page form. And if you're retiring before 65 and you're looking at maybe a marketplace plan instead, well, those 2026 rules made it a little bit harder than it was previously because just last year, the enhanced subsidies had no hard income cliff, meaning your premium was simply capped as a percentage of your income. So a couple last year could do a large Roth conversion, show more income, and still keep a pretty meaningful credit, depending on what state they're in. But those rules expired at the end of 2025. But in 2026, the 400% of the poverty level cliff is back. And that means that now just $1 of income over that line can cost you every dollar of subsidy. And the average subsidized premium more than doubled from 25 to 26, from roughly $888 a year to now over $1,900. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. That doesn't mean it's not manageable. In fact, we help clients plan their bridge year income around this all the time. But it belongs in your plan if you're planning to go that route. and you want to make sure that you know what the new numbers are and how that's going to affect you. That's why I always say you don't want to make any of these decisions in a silo. And it's exactly why I always equate retirement income planning to a Rubik's Cube, because every decision you make often impacts something else, whether you realize it or not. So your retirement date, when you claim Social Security, how much and when you do a Roth conversion, tax gain harvesting, Medicare choices, you get the point. All of those are only one piece of your overall retirement puzzle that you're trying to put together. So getting the order right can be worth six figures over the course of your retirement, especially if you have a pretty good amount of money still saved. So let's put all this together with those 4 simple questions that I promised you earlier, so you can ask yourself, man, am I really ready to do this and retire early? Can I and should I? Question 1 is, does the plan work earlier? So you want to run your numbers here by retiring a few years earlier than maybe what your target is today at a withdrawal rate that you can defend. Now, for reference, Bill Bengen, the creator of the guy that made the 4% rule, he now puts the worst case number at 4.7%, while Morningstar's latest research lands closer to 3.7%. So remember a couple from earlier that I mentioned with one Social Security check turned on early and their buckets built out of the gate, right? We had it structured on the investment side properly. Well, I would say that they could even spend more, as I mentioned earlier, from day one. So that's why between the spending smile that we covered and a guardrails approach, you can likely spend even more than those rules suggest. I get into all of that on many other videos here on the channel, but ping me down below if you have any questions. Now, if your plan clears the conservative end of that range early, the money question is largely answered, and everything after that is going to be just optimization. Question 2 is, can you bridge healthcare at 65 and at what price? Because if you want to get an actual premium quote here, you don't want to just fire in the dark. You can if you want, but hey, be my guest. If you're looking for a great resource here, though, you can reach out to Move Health. That's who we use for our clients. I'll link them down below too. Either way, you're going to want to know that number well before you actually plan to retire, because if you plan to bridge your income around the subsidy line, this can be actually a little bit lower than you think. Now, question 3 is, what are you retiring to? If I asked you, what does Tuesday at 10 a.m. look like in your first year of retirement, and there's no answer yet, well, that's part of your plan that might need some work still, and it deserves the same attention as your retirement income paycheck that you're going to be creating. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. That doesn't mean you'd be going crazy and doing a bunch of stuff. But if you plan for it, you'll be glad you did. And lastly, question 4 is, what is one more year doing for you? When you run your plan working one more year, it will almost always look better on paper. I can assure you of that. But the real question is whether or not it's still worth it. I would do a little side-by-side comparison, the old-fashioned, just draw the line down and say, hey, here's what one more year is going to get me. And on the flip side of the coin, here's what one more year is going to cost me. You might have plenty of money on one side, but you have a limited supply of those go-go years. And sometimes that trade-off is worth it, but that's totally up to you. Just make it a trade that you're willing to make and one that you're glad that you did 10 years from now. Now, quite frankly, when you answer those 4 questions honestly, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either you confirm that working past 65 is pretty right for you, or maybe you have to, or you'll find out that the finish line is a lot closer than you might have thought before you started watching this video. And I've watched that second conversation play out more times than I can count. Someone realizing that they have the retirement green light sooner than they thought possible. Well, that never really gets old. Look, you only get one shot at retirement, and there's a fundamental difference between a good enough plan and a great one. And a great plan isn't just one on paper. It's what your hard-earned money that you work so hard for is going to allow you to do with your time and your health while you have it. And if you'd like help running those 4 questions, and probably even many more questions you may have, click the link down below and set up a call, and I'd be happy to chat. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kyle Kuya, and I will see you in the next video.